Good afternoon. My name is Nitin. I'm from ONDC, Open Network for Digital Commerce. Before I start the session, maybe it's just a show of hands that how many of you have heard of ONDC? Oh, that's an audience that has heard of ONDC. Reduces my work, right? How many of you think you know what ONDC does? How many of you think you understand ONDC? What is it trying to do? What is it doing? Okay, yeah, I mean that's the context. Not very different from what I anticipated. So before we talk about incubation, I want to spend some time on explaining what ONDC is. There is no precedence for something similar anywhere else in the world. While bits and parts have been done by different people in different contexts, but there is nothing similar anywhere in the world, and therefore it takes some time kind of internalizing how this is different, how this will change the way we do business, and how this will change the ecosystem all around, right? So I'll start by moving ahead and talking about, so why was ONDC set up, right? I'll start there so that before we do what is ONDC, we do why was ONDC set up, right? One of the key challenges that the government looked at was, while there is tremendous noise about e-commerce, fundraising, big companies, apps, ubiquitous, etc. But when you actually, look at the numbers are startling. It's only about 6 to 7% of all commerce in India, and that makes it fairly low compared to even peer economies like say in Indonesia at 20%, or slightly similar size economy like a UK at 23, 24%. US, China all are about 20%, right? So there is a problem that we intend to solve, and this becomes even more stark when you move out of, say, a tier 1 city, right? When you move out a metro or a capital city, the penetration falls dramatically. Most of the penetration is a tier 1 city construct. Additionally, B2B, which is business to business, this penetration only about 1 to 1.5%, right? So all in all, e-commerce penetration in India is low, and that's one of the problem statements that we are looking to solve, right? Now, when we looked at why this problem statement existed, why is e-commerce penetration in India low, right? And if you have to improve e-commerce penetration in India, you have to go back to first figuring out what are those problem statements, right? So it all starts, consumers are on online, right? There are myriad apps, you all buy stuff online, etc. There are multiple hurdles on why some customers don't buy, but we started by saying one of the big hurdles to solve is how do we bring more sellers online? And if the previous slide, the Kirana penetration is abysmally low, right? Now, what does it take for a store to go online, right? Let's start there, right? If I have a regular store, it could be selling anything in retail, right? What does it take for it to go online? Would anybody want to take a stab at it? Constant updation of products online, but I will come a step back and say you need a store online. That's the first thing, right? So you go set up a website, you build inventory, you want to update, etc., right? But for anybody who's attempted to build a website, the mother of all challenges remains demand. Right? How do you build awareness that I have a website, right? How do I, tell everybody that, hey, I exist here, right? I have a store here. The product that you're looking for is available. You're very dependent on performance marketing, search marketing, all of that to build it, right? Now, these are not things easy for a small store owner. While there have been multiple opportunities created by website companies, e-commerce enablers like Shopify, demand still remains a core problem, right? That how do you kind of bring demand? And while many of businesses started with great products, just the inability to, be visible, be available becomes the, Achilles heel, right? The next is looking at, what else can we do, right? So I can go to a Shopify, I can set up a website. Okay, no, I can join one of the platforms which can bring me online, right? You come online on platforms. Now, while platforms have done a great job in bringing online a lot of businesses, it still remains a problem because the platforms work on a very, very uniform concept, right? They bring in their terms. It's a one size fits all. For a domain, for an area, everybody follows the same terms, right? And it may not always work for sellers, right? And in many of the domains when we interact, whether it's food, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's mobility, one of the core challenges also is the commission structure, right? And when we looked at the commission structure, I say, why are businesses charging upwards of 20, 30% to, come online? But coming back, ultimately a store owner has an option of maybe one or two platforms with typically one-sided terms. that help them go online, right? And there's no other option. Now if you were to solve for it, right, we have to first go back and say, why do platforms charge to 20 or 30%, right? Now, I mean, all the monopoly conversations that we learned in B schools will come, but I don't want to go there. Let's simplify it, right? A platform, when you look at it classically in an e-commerce business, right, it does everything. It builds the core tech, it builds the demand side, which is the consumer side, a mobile app, the entire expenditure of spending money to build awareness, bring customers. It also builds the entire seller side across domains, the product, the inventory, the updation, the processes required. It also builds the logistics capability to be able to deliver across the country, right? It could be a hyperlocal product, it could be a national product. All of this is kind of built by a single company, right? Now, a lot of us work in tech, I'm assuming. We've seen BPO big in India, right? What do you think is the core thesis that, if you go to manufacturing or services that companies work with, right? You outsource, right? You kind of say, okay, this is the core thing that I do as a business. There are several peripheral parts of this that could be outsourced, right? And therefore, you find somebody else who's more efficient, more capable, is able to do it at scale and is able to do it cheaper, right? E-commerce companies, because they were traditionally well-funded and wanted to have speed as a very important metric, right? Typically have never looked at efficiency as a problem statement. They've always looked at scaling as a problem statement, right? And therefore, you've built a business without trying to be efficient, right? Now, let's take it an example of what some of the other businesses that have evolved. I mean, I come from automotive before ONDC. I used to work for Nissan, right? If you take a car, right, the infotainment comes from somebody else, the tire comes from somebody else, the windshield comes from somebody else, the steel body comes from somebody else. All of this is put together, integrated and presented to you as a car, but built by an ecosystem of suppliers, a tier 1s, tier 2s, tier 3s, tier 4s, who all come together to build that car, right? This is something traditionally has not been done in e-commerce. Or whether you look at the business process outsourcing industry, that is very big in India, right? Somebody says, okay, I've got finance and accounting, right? I've got order to purchase, right? All of these processes can we outsource and give it to somebody who's able to bring in scale and efficiency and therefore is able to do better, right? Now, this were the guiding principles we used, and we came to what is called the design of ONDC revolves around two interrelated principles, right? Unbundling and interoperability, right? Now, unbundling I spoke, right? You pick up different parts and give it to different experts, right? So, in e-commerce, can the consumer side, the platform, the seller side, the logistics side, and even in each of these sides, the tech versus the operations, can it be owned by different parties, right? And therefore, right, suddenly opportunities start emerging. And then you look at something called interoperability, right? Interoperability is also a very, very common concept in business. It's just that it's new in e-commerce, right? So, let's pick up our mobility phones, right? Imagine a world where, as a Vodafone customer, I could only speak with Vodafone, right? Or as an Airtel customer, I could only speak with, say, an Airtel customer, right? We all are familiar with interoperable systems, irrespective of which telephone operator you work with. As long as the number is dialed correctly, the networks interconnect and are interoperable, and you are able to talk to anybody else, right? Again, this is something that has not existed in e-commerce, right? So at a very fundamental level, these were the two design principles we used. We want to unbundle the platform approach, bring a network approach, and therefore have systems that are interoperable. Now, for people from tech, they will understand this, better. Now, let's take an example of email, right? 40 years ago, somebody wrote a protocol called SMTP, right? And 25 years ago, somebody came up with a Hotmail and then Gmail, and then life was never the same again, right? But if you look at it, when I send you an email, right, it works seamlessly, right? I don't talk to my tech team who contact your IT team, build an API, right? Talk to your servers, set up a VPN, do communication, all of that, right? It happens seamlessly, right? This is because the architecture is built on a protocol which is interoperable and used by everybody, right? So ubiquitously, everybody, if they use a protocol, interoperable systems bring in, right? ONDC is trying to build the open protocol for digital commerce, right? So it's a digital commerce protocol, and email is a good example to try and kind of internalize it, right? Saying that there is a common protocol which multiple companies will use, right? And therefore be able to communicate with each other. And each company, like I said earlier, is operating in a specialist area, not trying to do the entire e-commerce universe, right? Not the entire platform, but parts of that. And I'll talk more. So we built on the open interoperable made in India specification called Beacon Foundation now FIDE. This is what, built the first version of the protocol on top of which ONDC has been built, right? Now moving on, let's look at the platforms a little more closely, right? So when you look at it, on the left side, the first column you see in both platforms 1 and platform 2, you will see search for product. This is what consumers use, right? You search a product, you build a cart, you go to a payment gateway, you pay, right? The center is what typically the seller side does, right? If you're a seller online, you will have catalog management, you will put in your product services, you will have pricing, and there is order, fulfillment, returns, cancellation, etc. And the entire order delivery process, returns, etc. All of that come in. Both platforms do the same thing, right? At a structural level, both platforms have these 3 columns, and these 3 columns is an abstraction. There could be multiple sub pillars to this, but essentially there is customer side, seller side, and logistics side, right? But since these platforms are closed wall gardens, right? All of this happens within the platform, right? So if you're searching for a product on platform 1, you will not see the catalog on platform 2, right? Now this and vice versa. And this brings in some interesting challenges is that as a seller, right, you have to be on every platform to be able to meet the customer, because the customer could be on any platform, right? And vice versa. As a customer, you have to go search on multiple platforms to get the same product, right? Because it could be from different sellers and you want variety, choice, etc. Each platform, therefore, suboptimally spends that money to acquire customers, right? Like you and I have been acquired by every e-commerce platform, right? If you're a seller, you have to be acquired by every e-commerce platform again, right? And there is a suboptimal, cost spend that happens because there is huge amount of duplication, right? And I am a customer, the performance marketing cost is 2,000 rupees. 5 platforms have acquired me. The cost of acquiring Nitin is now 10,000 rupees, right? And therefore now it creates an artificial barrier. So tomorrow you may have a great idea, right? But because performance marketing costs have spiraled up, if you have to ever look at consumer acquisition, right? Say you want to build a 1 million customer base, a platform equivalent, right? A 1 million into 2,000 million, 200 crores is the investment required to the marketing, just the marketing investment required to arguably use performance marketing to acquire customers and build a business, right? So essentially the platforms therefore have a few disadvantages. Once they are wall gardens, right? Their cost structures therefore are unfriendly, and you have to be on each of them and on their terms to be able to operate and do business, right? And that's where the disadvantage is. Now let's try and reimagine this, and that's what we're trying to do is, let's split this into 3 independent businesses, right? For a minute, right? There is a retail buying application, right, which does the consumer side. There is a retailer seller application, right? All of this content is available on the website, right? You can get it. If you don't, please just ping me, I'll send you the deck, right? And there is a logistics application. 3 different, businesses trying to operate independently, right? And all of them, and that's the unbundling, and the interoperability is all of them talking on a common protocol called the ONDC protocol, talking to each other, right? Now, for a minute, this might look like, somebody may argue this is an academic rearrangement, right? Okay, sounds fancy, so what, right? Now, what it does is it creates some interesting possibilities, right? Any retail buying application could be talking to any retail selling application, right? Across, right? And talking to any logistics application, right? Now, what does this mean, right? What this means is any app, right, which has a good consumer base, right? Let's take State Bank of India, right? Couple of million customers, probably more, right? If State Bank of India were to do e-commerce, right, they will have to pick every domain, build the sellers, build the supply, build the technology capability, and then go to market with it, right? Versus if the retail buying application is on the ONDC network, right, all it has to do is, build the buyer experience, right? Say it's food, develop the food search, display, payment, right? 3 very high level interfaces, and on their app go live with food because the sellers have been acquired by somebody else. The logistics delivery will get by somebody else. All of these people exist already on the network. And my favorite example is For those of you who live in Bangalore or some of the other cities, you'll see Ola is doing Ola Foods, right? Many years ago they did Food Panda, but they're back in food. And what's interesting is they have launched this by just developing the buyer side on top of the Ola application, right? The network has about 70,000 restaurants online across India. Ola has access to them, right? The network has a logistics network available to do food delivery. They can tap into them, right? So Ola, by developing just that buyer app experience, right, and equivalent, is able to now launch food. And that's one example, and there could be more, right? Similarly, now when you look at a seller application, right, now, traditional e-commerce players who are not in e-commerce, right? Ola is an example, but I'm saying, say, State Bank of India, which was not in e-commerce, can enter e-commerce. This works both ways, right? Now, on the seller side, right, many of you would be familiar with companies that have built ERPs for supermarkets, right? Or point of sale systems for restaurants, right? These systems were largely technology systems which were used for operations, right? But these systems have all the information typically a cataloging will do, right? There is going to be information in terms of all the products, all the pricing, all the updates, everything is information available. Imagine if this system can suddenly plug into the ONDC network and interact with Ola and SBI and start serving orders, right? So your point of sale system, which you run your restaurant operations with, or your retail ERP that you use in the supermarket, right, which has all your catalog information, plugs into the network and becomes the catalog service that you as a seller, right, used to be a part of the network, right? And therefore, suddenly a whole set of businesses which otherwise couldn't do e-commerce, right, can also potentially start doing e-commerce. Yeah, and the same on logistics, right? You're a third-party logistics player. You have 2, maybe 3 customers who give you all the demand versus you're on the network. It could be a buyer app sending you a logistics request. It could be a seller app sending you a logistics request. It could be anybody on the network sending you a logistics request. And therefore, newer players are kind of able to come to the network and kind of start doing business, right? Moving on, let me give you a logical flow of the network. This is how it looks, right? The consumers on the buyer apps interact via the ONDC network, the sellers on the seller app, and the logistics app kind of do the entire delivery bit. For some of you behind, there are chairs forward. If you would want to come in, there are seats forward. So this is the theory of it, right? This is the theory, the thesis of it. Here is where we are today, right? We have 12 buyer applications with potentially 100 million buyers. We have 11 logistics applications, and on both you will see some who's who, and 35 seller applications which have collectively onboarded 2.1 lakh sellers, mobility plus retail, with 3 crore plus SKUs, right? So that's where we are in about 12 to 14 months, and broadly this is where we are. And you'll see, on top you'll see names that are familiar. There is Paytm, there is Kotak Bank, there is PinCode, which is the PhonePe, ONDC app, there is Yatri, Namayatri, which are mobility apps. Below you'll see a lot of brands that you may not be very familiar with, right? But all of them have been, big names in the B2B space in retail, right? They've been the ones that are building supermarket ERPs, the ones that are building, point of sale systems, etc. A lot of names, right? InnoBits, eSamudaya, Growth Falcons, UEngage, Global Linker, bunch of apps, right? All of these together, right, as buyer apps, seller apps, and logistics app, together work on the ONDC network together, collectively. Now, this is, that 58 is the number where we are today, and there's a large pipeline of people coming in, right? We have about 13,000 underway, about 148 advanced stages. We were probably about 15 to 20 apps about 6 months back. Now we have 58, and this number continues to grow, right? In fact, Kerala, we have 2 apps. We have Rapidor on B2B. Thompson is here. Thompson, right? and we had Dilip also yesterday, who's seller app, right? These are apps from Kerala, which are very active on the network, right? So, a whole pipeline of apps coming in. Now, let me try and give you a flavor of what a transaction looks like, right? The logos are illustrative. All of these companies are not on the network yet. The ones you're on the network or on the previous slide, right? So, let's say there is Vijay who wants to buy a bag of atta, right? Atta is the example, right? From Kumar store, right? Now, he logs into his favorite buyer application, which in this case is a WhatsApp or Paytm or, or Google Pay, right? He searches, and in his vicinity, this is a hyper-local service, right? See that there is Kumar Stores and Ramachandran's, which both offer atta. Kumar Store without delivery offers it 50. Ramachandran says, I'll take care of delivery, 150 rupees, right? Illustrative numbers, right? Now this transaction can happen on the network in multiple ways, and that's the important thing. That's what the open part, right? Unlike a platform which says this is the only way the transaction will happen to build great customer experience, we let it be open for each company to decide how they want to operate, right? So Kumar Store does not offer delivery, right? Therefore, the customer also needs to do a logistics search. The network doesn't mandate that this needs to happen. I'm saying the network is capable of providing this, right? So you do a logistics search between Dunzo and Loadshare. There is a choice and Dunzo offers at 50. You place 2 orders, 50 for Adda, 50 for logistics, right? You could also order in from Ramachandran's, which is 1 order. They will take care of logistics, right? Or Kumar Store will say, okay, pay me 50, logistics free. It's nearby, so up to 2 kilometers, I will send somebody and deliver it free, right? All of these models of seller choice, consumer choice are enabled by the network. The network in itself is open, does not mandate a transaction flow, but the network protocol is capable of all of these transaction flows, and depending on which business you are, what consumer experience you want to offer, all of these possibilities exist, right? So these are some of our apps that I spoke about. It will be good if some of you place some orders, see how the experience is. Trivandrum is still small. We are early days in Trivandrum. The supply density is still small, but Yatri in Kochi will give you a cab or an auto. PIN code or Paytm in Bangalore can give you grocery, food, fashion, some of the other domains that are live, and bring that differentiation. The other thing I also wanted to highlight is, so far we spoke B2C, which means these are all consumer-centric conversations, right? You as a consumer, you as a seller, trying to look at a consumer business, right? It's a B2C, right? But what is also important is the network is not just B2B, the network is also B2B, right? Now, if you are a store, right? On the B2B, we're also enabling the distributor ordering process, right? So if you're a store, you are the one, so Vijay store was the one, selling the atta. Vijay store's bulk purchase to the distributor also will be enabled by the network protocol, right? And therefore, all of these companies will come together, and there is a B2B element. So every seller is also a potentially buyer on the network, right? And he could buy different services. In the previous example, he was buying logistics. In this example, he's buying his goods or services that he wants to sell. Now, currently, this is the categories, domains that are live. On B2C, we are live in a bunch of, there are bunch of domains: food, grocery, home, electronics, BPC, agri, health and wellness, fashion, services. We have mobility. B2B, we have grocery, fashion, logistics, and of course, financial products, including loan, credit, mutual funds, insurance, and services such as, carpentry, plumbing, all the other services. These are in the pipeline. These are all coming in. Essentially, the thesis is like payment is digitized now fairly, right? Any commerce with a B2B, B2C will be enabled on the protocol, and there could be companies building up businesses to digitize and take it online. I also want to emphasize on the B2B part, we are now also live for exports, right? We did a transaction from Singapore. Reserve Bank of India is tied up with Monetary Authority of Singapore, which is their equivalent in Singapore. They have an app called Proxterra. Proxterra's buyer app will help buyers in the Southeast Asian markets to search for goods that they want to buy from, say, India. And if there is a seller on the network, right, somebody wants 10 tons of oranges, right, it's season, right, that request will come, and we'll also enable that entire B2B transaction. We're also building the underlying other financial requirements, and Thompson probably could talk more about B2B, he's the expert on B2B, right? And all of that is also getting enabled. Let's take it, what does it, mean, right, in the long term, right? And I'm not saying this is necessarily the only way to do business on ONDC network, right? You could do it any way you choose. Just one example, right? Somebody wants to come from Delhi to Kerala to Huddle for 15 days, right? Or say a 2-month assignment, right? You need a suitcase, you need a flight ticket, you need a service apartment, you probably need a Malayalam language kit, so to say, right? All of these you will go to different platforms, right? More than one platform perhaps, search around, right? Then build a catalog in each case and make 4 or 5 checkouts, right? Versus on the ONDC network, it will be possible, and I'm saying the word is possible, not necessary, that all of these goods and services could be searched on a super app from State Bank of India or from PhonePe or from Paytm, where you'll be able to search for all of these and do a single checkout and a single payment, right? So that's one way to imagine what the network could change. Moving on, so I'm not going to talk through all the bullets, but at a high level for buyers, right? Any of your favorite platforms, right, today, right, that you're very happy, comfortable with, will offer you a slew of other products and services that they don't offer. So you don't need to hop platforms, right? I mean, you could still want a specialist service from a specialist app, but potentially, right? And there are whole, advantages around that, right? The buying experience is also going to change from in terms of hyperlocal. So let me give you a flavor of what grocery looks like, say in Bangalore, right? You're looking for atta, right? You're not seeing a dark store or a fulfillment center that you don't know and only a catalog. You actually see neighborhood stores, right? The 2 or 3 main supermarkets that you're familiar with, a whole bunch of, kirana stores that you have seen, you've probably grown up with or you've lived around with. You see all of them, right? And you buy from one of them, the one that you choose. So one of the things that the network also enables is, we're not getting into the business. It's a common question that's asked that, okay, but the platform provide trust, guarantee, blah, 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 right? I'll come back and say, these stores are stores you've been buying up for, probably years, decades, if not from generations, right? So you're buying from them, the trust relationship is established, and we continue to enable them, right? For the seller, I think we spoke fair amount, right? Cost structure is better. We see far better commission structures on the network than on the platform. Wider access to the entire marketplace, right? You come online, you have access to everybody, right? And the other thing that we see as big thing is, and this is also a network feature, is that your profile is your own, right? So if you are I'm ex-Uber, so I can talk Uber, you're an Uber driver, 5,000 trips, 4.95 rating, you leave Uber, right? You go join Rapido, right? You start, it is day 1, trip 1, rating 0, right? Whereas on the network, if you leave one of the seller apps and join the other, right? There is no limitations in terms of demand. Irrespective of which app, if you are the most suitable person to fulfill that order, you will definitely get a request. You can choose to accept or not, right? It will be trip 5001, rating 4.95, and life goes on, right? The entire rating structure on the network is democratized so that the sellers own it, right? You don't lose all your information that was on the platform when you leave the platform, right? A large part of the information is something that moves with you and remains your profile, right? And therefore, that differentiation, right? For, say, technology companies, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is happening, right? Newer monetization opportunities, easier to go online and build online businesses, and I'll talk a little more, all right? Less time to scale. Imagine if you on day 1, you have, say, 100 restaurants in Kovalam online, right? It's a tourist market, right? Imagine if the demand is served by 100 million plus monthly active customer applications like Paytm and PhonePe, right? They take care of your demand, right? You get that on day 1, right? You don't need to build anything. If somebody's Kovalam is searching on Paytm for fried fish, right? And you are somebody who's enabled a fried fish seller, you will come up immediately, right? Because you're the most optimum seller, right? So whole bunch of opportunities. I have a slide coming up. I'll talk about it there, right? But having said that, there were a couple of other things that I'd like to emphasize, right? ONDC is an open network capability in infrastructure. We are not an application, a platform, or a product, right? What that means is you can't go to ONDC or download an ONDC app and search for product services and buy them, right? We are back-end infrastructure. We enable apps to talk to each other. So very critical that this is understood. Right? There is infinite models and fertile for innovation. What's happening is because you've unbundled, made all of this available, several new innovation models are emerging, which could be very different from how e-commerce happens today, right? We're not a central intermediary, and in the transaction flow, I don't want to go technical, but essentially ONDC enables the protocol, we enable search and discovery, right? The transaction actually happens peer-to-peer between the 2 apps. So if it's Paytm, getting somebody from seller app, right? Then the transaction is peer-to-peer. The network is not a part of the transaction, right? Also, we are a market and a community-led initiative. We are not a single model. We're not a central intermediary, and we are not a regulator, right? So very critical things. We often ask this question, so will you regulate pricing? How will you operate as a center? We are not a central intermediary, right? We are a protocol company that enables search and discovery. Moving ahead, right? So it's a made in India product. We expect it to democratize e-commerce significantly, and the success of ONDC will spur many such initiatives. This is our advisory council with stalwarts from multiple domains. You see Nandan right up there, for by R. Sharma, Adil, right? Whole bunch of people who've come together to kind of, guide ONDC in its setup. Basis the advisory council set up, ONDC was set up as a company in December of 2021, right? We did our first alpha transaction in April 2022, first beta transaction in September 2022. That was our launch. So we're about 14 months old, and in these 14 months, this is where we are, right? We have about 2.1 lakh sellers onboarded, 3 crore products, 496 cities with Alpha Live, which means at least a seller exists, and 7 cities, which are all the large cities where there is a beta live. In many other cities, you could still transact, right? But the density, etc., may be low. So this is where we are in 1.5 years, right? Now, why am I talking to you about this at Huddle, right? Of course, ONDC is happening, you see, right? One of the core things that we want to emphasize is the opportunities for new businesses to come in, right? Pre-ONDC, everything had to be done the platform way, which means you had to figure out how to build the entire suite end to end. Right? There was no other way to do it, right? It's like you had to build the consumer side, you had to plan for consumer marketing, you had to build the platform, you had to build the seller side, seller marketing and acquisition, and of course the logistics if it's a product, not services, right? In the ONDC world, you can do parts and still run successful businesses, right? So I'll talk about some of the opportunities that are coming in, right? Yeah, so let's talk tech for startups, right? There are a bunch of e-commerce adapters, right? A lot of these large companies, they go online, right? We are a protocol, right? So, and you have a set of APIs, but we have a standardized set of APIs. Everybody has to use a standard for us to be able to run a network, right? So huge opportunity in adapters, right? Every product services, every company wanting to go live doesn't want to change its stack, right? And we don't want them to make changes to their core platforms, right? All you need to build is adapters and software development kits for others to innovate, right? Lightweight apps, you can pick up, do an app in app, right? You go to somebody and say, okay, I understand mobility on ONDC, and my dear Federal Bank, if you want to go live with a mobility product, like if you want to offer rides for your customers in Kochi, here is a lightweight app in app, right? You can go live, right? So Federal Bank doesn't have to worry about figuring out, doing an RFP. You can do a, operational pricing, right, or a transactional pricing model, and Federal Bank at zero cost can go live. And Federal Bank is just an example, right? It could be any large app with a consumer base, right? Catalog digitization, management, and enrichment. This is again a huge opportunity, right? If you look at it, when you look at retail, right, and I don't want to put a percentage, but a very significant part of retail catalog is not from big companies, right? There are specialist products, and the best is food, right? Your butter chicken is not my butter chicken, and my biryani is not your biryani. The way it looks, the color of the chicken, everything could be different, right? So digitization of entire catalog and getting the catalog to be something that is exciting and spurs more business, again, is a big opportunity, right? How do you let's take a problem statement, right? Say Trivandrum has 5 lakh stores, right, as an example, and the number could be more, right? How do you get all 5 lakh online quickly, right? How do you get all of them digitized, over 12 to 18 months, right? How do you build catalogs? How do you build up repeatability? How do you build simple tech, right? That makes it easy for stores to come online quickly, right? Great opportunity, right? Guided buying experience, and my favorite example here is, right, if you have traveled across India, in many states you will see, when you tell the driver, and assuming you're not taking Uber, Ola, and you give him a destination, right, he will not know how to type it in English, right? And he will go use a voice search to, you tell him I want to go to Connaught Place. Connaught Place is not an easy thing to spell for a, person with limited, English skills, right? He will go to the mic and say Connaught Place, and Google will pick it up, right? If you look at commerce, assisted commerce is a very, very important emerging part. And when you move from tier 1 to tier 2 India, right, intuitive guided buying experiences could be another big area, right? And you don't need to build a consumer product. You could build a B2B product and say, I can enable your e-commerce app, right, to be able to do voice search-led buying, right? Equivalent, right? Same thing with native Indic language support, right? You don't need to always do this in English, right? There are so many people, right? Again, when you move from core, English-speaking tier 1s, right? Many people need support on things like Indic language support. There's a lot of work that's already happening, right? You don't need to build everything. But can you leverage it and convert into a business idea that enables it, right? Automated testing and certification. This is for more companies that are coming to the network, right? A lot of people, ONDC outsources in the entire testing process where your entire QA, certification, protocol adherence, right? Can you make it automated and simple? Right? Can you put up a website that somebody, uploads his log and you give them a report saying, yeah, 95%, these are the 5 things you are wrong on the ONDC protocol, right? Rest you're ready for certification, right? Something like that, right? Open source maps. Now, if you look at anybody who's done a hyper-local business, and I'm assuming some of you are, right? Early days when businesses are low, the cost of a trip is as high as 30 rupees, right? Even if you bring it down to say 10 rupees, right? In a market like India, where, say average fare is 200, 250, right? You can't have 5% of the cost just going for the map experience, right? And this is some of the areas where some of our apps are doing a lot of pioneering work on how to solve this, how to make Google Maps cheaper, use open source maps together, build that entire process that your map cost is down. Because as long as we are, only large platforms that are, private equity funded, right? The current map cost structure will survive, right? For a new business, the Google Map structure is absolutely untenable, right? If you're building, experimenting, right? When you do 10, 20, 50 transactions, it will not hurt you, right? But say you start doing 5,000 transactions at 30 rupees, right? You're looking at a 1.5 lakh day bill just for maps. Forget infrastructure, forget salaries, right? And that's not tenable. So there's a lot of work that's happening there where you could contribute, right? And innovate beyond e-commerce, right? So, the protocol is interoperable and unbundled and can get anybody to talk to each other, right? So you could be enabling training, you could be enabling many other things which are not commerce, right? Opportunities exist, right? The other is reconciliation settlement. Money has to move between multiple parties, right? It's a huge area, right? The money could be collected by the buyer, seller or logistics. The network is neutral depending on the domain. But in each case, somebody collects the money and at least 2 parties have to be paid, right? And there has to be that deduction of what each party, right? If I take 2% commission, the seller, I'm a buyer app, seller app takes 2%, logistics 1. 5% has to be deducted, right? At various stages and needs to be paid, right? And now the payment will happen, simple, right? But there's a fair amount of reconciliation settlement, there is disputes, there is returns. How does all of this work? Big area, right? And of course, I spoke about voice search, smart search, fuzzy search, etc., right? Now again, there are other opportunities and I'm not going to talk all of them, right? If you look at it, things like, super apps, online dispute resolution, these are all areas where you could contribute, right? Because as it goes online, as there are multiple apps involved, there is requirement for somebody to kind of anchor, say, dispute resolution, right? Because unlike a platform world where all the complaint is to one guy, right? Now the complaint will be received by the buyer app from the consumer, for example, right? But there is a requirement to work with the seller app or the logistics app to resolve it. And there is online dispute resolution required because there are multiple parties involved, right? So there are opportunities, a whole bunch of things, right? So with that, I'll take a pause and, that's the presentation. Would love to take some questions. Thompson, if you're around, why don't you join me? Thompson isn't here. Okay, please feel free. Yeah.
Do you have Unicommerce integration, Unicommerce or any order management system integration?
Sorry?
Order management system integration with...
See, we have several connectors, right? I'll give you like Shopify, right? So there is there are at least a few and I can name one. There is something called Shopalist, right? So if you're a Shopify company, if you use Shopify for e-commerce, you can work with Shopify and it's a connector available on the Shopify app store and integrate it.
But if we are actually having a single inventory which is actually integrated with multiple platforms.
Okay.
So the common inventory can be synchronized with ONDC as well?
Hold on. So this is the mental model, right? ONDC does not take your inventory.
Exactly.
Right? That's a very important thing, right? At search,
so
whoever is the relevant party will respond with their inventory. This is the platform to network difference, right? Why are we a network and not a platform, right? We never collect and you don't upload anything onto ONDC, right? So when there is a search, right, for a product that you have cataloged, right, and it is relevant to you, right, you will respond with your catalog, right, and that too to the buyer app that is requesting it, right, not to the network, right. So ONDC is not a part of the transaction. We enable the protocol, and when Paytm sends it to you, right, you respond saying, yes, I have a seller that has got coconut oil, right, and you send your catalog. That's the only time there is any information flowing on the network for transaction. There is no, you don't upload your entire inventory onto the ONDC network. This is a very, very important mental model concept that I want you to understand.
Okay. So out of the 12 buyer apps, which one we can choose which one we want to sell and which
Why
one
would you want to choose?
But as you said, the brand and buyer application is handling the
Think of it
payment
this way,
terms,
right? If you are a business and you're selling something, do you care where? Right?
Understood.
Example, right? You will look at it and say, okay, am I willing to pay 3% plus commission? And this is configurable and can change at every transaction level.
Okay, so
Right.
for example, what you're saying is like right now Paytm is charging 3 and tomorrow they can charge 10.
They can charge 10 and you can choose not to work with them, that is.
So you're not regulating that.
No. See, the whole point is, today the need, you think of regulation because there are only two people.
No,
Right.
then how is it going to be cheaper than Zomato and Swiggy?
It is going to be, see, cheaper or not, I don't know, but it's going to be better for the simple reason that you will not see apps switching off when they have high demand, right? Because when you have to pay 25% versus 3%, right, or 4% or 6%, whatever that number is, right? Where do you think as a seller you will be, right? If you have done, your food buying in a small city in India, the first thing that when happens, the rain goes up, right? Is
Search
everybody
prices.
logs off, right? Why does that happen, right? Because they know their inventory is fixed, demand is going up, they don't want to pay 22% commission, right?
Okay.
So lower commission structure fundamentally improves the market, right? Many restaurants that don't come online or only have limited inventory online will come online, right? And stores also therefore prefer us. Right?
No, but there is a question, right? For example, if Paytm charge 3, pin code charge 5, and let's say Magic Pin charge 7. So who do I do business with? I also need to pay for logistics.
Correct. So 3, 5, 7. What you need to look at it is, right, that what is the max? See, as a seller, this is how I think people will approach it, right? What's the max? And that's the configuration question. I'll go back to what you asked, right? What's the max commission I'm willing to pay? And what's the max logistics distance I'm willing to serve? Because you will have a sense on what the per kilometer cost is, right? So if the request is more than 5%, right, or more than 3 kilometers, I am not even responding to the search.
No, why I ask the question is because if it is one-time configurable, if tomorrow Paytm changes it from 3 to 7, I'll go and need to change my programming then.
See, what we are seeing apps do is your seller apps make it configurable at your end, right? It's not necessarily a back-end programmatic change always, right? You can always make it a front-end configuration that the restaurant can reevaluate. See, it's not as dynamic. I don't think it will be that dynamic, right? But it will be it can potentially be dynamic, right? But the point here is, it's not whether I should change it when Paytm changes, right? The question here is, are you willing to pay 7%?
Okay.
Right? And if you are, then your programming should say anything up to 7% respond.
Understood. So what I'm trying to understand is, for example, if I have some restaurant partners with me who are selling, like I'm not willing to sell for a platform which charge me for more than 15%, for example. Okay, so whoever place orders for 20, I'll decline.
Correct.
So that is a one-time configuration which I'll do it at my end.
Correct.
And if the platform keeps on changing it, fluctuating it, my system breaks.
No, that's okay, right? Because anyway, your seller was not, if platform, 15 or lower, that means 1, 2, 3, 7, 12, everything will work, right?
Correct.
And your sellers are saying, I don't want to pay more than 15, right? So what is breaking? If it is 16, the seller anyway doesn't want to do business. Nothing is breaking, right? The seller has told you that I will not pay more than 15, right?
Understood.
So anyway, he was not interested in an order with 16%, right? That's a conversation you have with Paytm boss. In my market, that doesn't work.
Okay. So can we have for example, if Paytm puts 15, will it be only for me or across the platform will be 15?
Paytm cannot do, anything cannot be at a seller or an app level.
Be
right?
network level.
It has to be network because we don't know who will. It's a network level configuration, right?
Okay.
Paytm can do other value adds like saying that, okay, if you fulfill 95% of requests, right, that orders that come in, right, I can give you a discount end of the month. Stuff like that is okay. But it can't say that with A app I will be at 5%, B app at 7% and C app at 12%. The democracy, the network policy doesn't permit that. So those are some of the interventions we make, right? As there is a network policy that ensures that there is a certain level of democracy that is maintained so that Individual apps don't build platforms on the network.
Understood.
Right.
So, is there any player which builds discounts and promotions on this? For example, normally what happens in e-commerce is like whoever has more discounts and promotion, they comes in the top.
See, right now we are seeing things like gift cards and other products coming in. There are people doing work around that, right? Network level discounts, etc. Right? But I think it's still early. So opportunity definitely is there.
Okay, so can it be done by a seller app?
Absolutely, why not?
Okay.
See, network has 3 or 4 broad rules, right? There's a buyer app, the seller app, logistics. There's something called technology service providers, which can be all kinds.
Okay.
They can be pure tech companies, they can be marketing companies, they can be discounting companies. I don't know.
Okay.
Innovation.
Okay. So can I build both seller and buyer app?
Yes. As long as you don't operate it as a platform where you say that I will only do business from my buyer app to my seller app, it is permissible. There are several companies that operate both sides.
So let's say for tomorrow, if PinCode comes with their own seller app, what will happen?
I mean, they will go live. And as long as they don't differentiate, right? See, look at it. See, in the unbundled network, the buyer app and the seller app are 2 independent entities, right? They may be operated by the same company, but the network policy will govern that they have to be neutral. So if they search, they can't send the request only to their seller app. Then they are in violation of the network policy. And that's something that we take care.
So that's regulated.
Yeah, that's regulated. It's not regulated, it is managed as part of the network policy.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, hi sir. I am working as a developer. So as a technical person or a developer, if I need to learn this and I need to apply for my next project or add on my portfolio, where should I start learning from?
Just go to GitHub, search for ONDC, you'll see the entire API documentation across domains, across implementations, and you can start from there. Yeah. All of our, we are a marketing community initiative, so almost all of our documentation is available online, right? Especially on APIs. Go to GitHub, you'll find everything.
Yeah, just an extension of that question where ONDC is doing a good job in terms of having a lot of theoretical materials out there, but we are developing a seller app, so there are a lot of in the slide before that you mentioned about opportunities and things like that. So being a Section 8 company, are you also looking at having sandboxes, incubation facilities for startups like that?
See, we're looking at sandboxes and incubation facilities, but see, ultimately what's happening is, ultimately this is a function of how much demand is for what, right? If we reach a stage that incubation is required for many more companies to come in, we'll do it, right?
Because the whole point of democratizing this e-commerce is going to be the scale. Right?
Correct.
So the need is already there.
See, we already have a few reference apps, right, for retail, etc. Suppose you're a seller app, you want a reference buyer app to test with, tinker around with.
Okay.
We have a reference buyer app. Similarly, a reference seller app, right?
Okay.
Multiple such domain-specific apps are also getting built. But I think the important point is, we will not be an app that is consumer or seller-facing.
Obviously.
Right? We build reference technology for people to experiment with, tinker with, and learn from.
Right.
And that is definitely happening. Right? But we are not in the business of competing with our apps tomorrow, and therefore we will not build any consumer-facing apps.
Right. Obviously, you are not there, but in terms of reference app, yes, that's a guidance out there saying that okay, if it's a mobility app or any such app, but like incubation works really different, right? In terms of you mentioned about 8 to 10 different areas that you want to really make strides.
Sure.
So if you want to get our hands dirty onto such things, I think those facilities.
No, I think, see, there again, we have a partnership approach, right? A lot of these, something like Startup Mission, right? Or Tamil Nadu Startup, right? Or Karnataka Digital Enablement.
Yeah.
We partner with them to enable, right?
Okay.
See, essentially our mandate is very wide, right? So going deep is a difficult choice for us, and we pick a few areas and there we go deep.
Understood.
Yeah. But having said that, the reference apps are things people can use to
Okay.
even build a commercial app, right? Because the code is available, right? It doesn't stop you.
Got it.
You might want to customize it, do stuff with it, etc. The reference app is not just for testing.
Got
It's
it.
a reference app for a reference implementation also.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Clear. Good. Thank you.
Hi sir. So my question is, do you see hotel bookings also coming onto the platform?
So-
and second question, you told how to integrate an API, but how do I build a seller app or a buyer app and then register to ONDC? How do I register it?
So I'll answer the second question first. Go to our website. There's a form to be filled. talk about what you want to do, which business you are entering, right? There will be somebody who will pick up from there. You know, you build the technical integration, there is, logs and technical testing, there is QA certification, and then you go live, right? That's the base process. Going back to see, like I said, everything will come. It's just a matter of time, right? Travel specifically, you will see next quarter. We already have mobility. We have transportation going, like Kochi Metro will go live in the next 2 months, right? So you'll be able to book the Kochi Metro ticket from any of the mobility apps, right? Or maybe from a bank app, from a Federal Bank app, anywhere, right? Kochi Metro's metro inventory will be available on the network in the next 2 months, right? So that's one example, and all metros are coming, right? So that's happening. Travel is logical. We already have conversations with airlines happening, for example, right? So travel is the next. So for every enablement, we have to do some reference, work, specs, etc., model implementations, which acts as a guide, right? So travel is under development. I would say travel first transaction you should expect by March.
So same question as that. If you want to build products, platforms or tools for the ONDC ecosystem, how should we connect? Should we connect with someone, or can we just integrate it in the ecosystem platform, just like in the website? Just apply it. How should we do it?
See, if you're not an app, you're what we call, what you will typically come in as a TSP, technology service provider, right? You build it, you have a reference implementation, we will list it on the website as a TSP available, right? So everybody who's done at least one implementation gets to get listed.
Yeah, hi. So right now it's fairly easy, but once you have 10 million sellers, how does my store stand out? What is the searchability engine behind this working like?
So I would agree and disagree with you, and I'll explain why, right? It doesn't matter if there are 10 million stores, right? Because you're going to buy from your vicinity for hyperlocal products, right? And you're going to compete with your category for national products, right? You're not going to compete with 10 million stores for every product, right? So if I'm buying grocery or if I'm buying biryani, it's a hyperlocal conversation, right? You're competing with 300 or 500 stores, right? Max, right? Or maybe a little more, right? Plus minus, right? And if you are, say, a leather bag manufacturer, you're competing with people in that leather industry, right? So firstly, that is it, right? Second, your reputation is getting built as with every transaction, right? Your reputation is also getting built in the buyer app side, depending on how you respond, request, fulfillment, all of that, right? So like every other democratic, business, right? If you perform well, the buyer apps will show you first because they also want to see, imagine, think of a buyer, right? A buyer app is a buyer's agent. He doesn't own a product, he doesn't own a service, his profit doesn't come from selling somebody else's product unless a transaction happens, right? So a buyer app as a buyer's agent is very, very indexed on making sure that he finds somebody that the buyer will buy from, right? So like in any democratic network, you will have to compete on fair terms, good product, good services, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, just a follow up to that, is there any seller app which is kind of making this into an advertising platform as well, just like how Google ads are there? Is there a way in which
advertising will come, but not at the it's not there at the moment, right?
Will you be regulating that in any?
We will not regulation is a word we stay away from, right? But what will happen is there will be network policy governing how advertising will happen whenever it happens, right? See, like even today there can be an advertisement as long as, what is the expectation from a buyer app, right? You have to transparently display everything that you got as a response, right? You will have to be transparent about what criteria you use for filtration and sorting, right? And provide the customer an ability to change that and have a look. Like if you thought that this customer is price sensitive, so lowest price first, right? You will have to give him a way to change that filter, right? Additionally, if you're doing advertising, you have to indicate it very clearly that this is an advertised product, right? So that's how the network policy kind of manages it.
So the GEM map has been around for the government has been around for 5-6 years, I think more than 6 years. So does the ONDC or the protocols, can it ease out the mechanism in which the government purchases, especially related to the GEM portal?
So GEM is joining the network, right? Let me start by saying that, right? So if you're registered on GEM, so GEM is essentially then a seller app, right?
Yes.
It's already aggregated a couple of, million sellers and all of them come in, right? Specific government buying, of course, more and more, even we expect any government consumer or seller facing platform, right? that is getting upgraded or now coming up to be ONDC protocol compliant, right? So therefore, that interoperability will be inbuilt. GEM is coming. That's where I would leave it. Yeah, cool. Anybody else, or can we call it a day? I mean, the ONDC website is a good source to start. If you are a techie, look at GitHub, right? There's a lot of technical information available, protocol, specs, model implementation, reference apps, etc., right? If you're looking to explore more, a version of this briefing happens every Tuesday, 3 to 4. Just register on our website. We'll send you a Google Meet link, and any friend of yours who wants to have a look at it, it's there. If you're interested in an app, please feel free to reach out, right? We're all accessible. My name is Nitin Nair. I'm on LinkedIn. Nair@ondc.org. That's my email ID. And look forward to you coming up. And I'll close by saying, I think the opportunity to think is the tier 2 opportunity, right? You know, like I said in the beginning, right? How do you bring 5 lakh stores in Trivandrum online? Or 7 lakh stores in Kochi online, right? And how do you do it the India way, right? Not, at a 24% commission with Google Maps, charging 30 rupees for a transaction. We will never be able to build a viable transaction, right? How do you do it the India way, right? ONDC is the opportunity to experiment and explore that. ONDC is the opportunity to try and do it at scale without having traditional cost structures, right? So I'll close by saying that, we invite you to be a part of the network, build new companies, build new innovative businesses. Thank you. Jai Hind.